Picture this, it's 1987. You want to hang out with your best friend, but you don't know where they are. There's no text. No DM. No find my friends. So what do? You ride your bike to their house, knock on the door, and hope they're home. And if they're not, you just wait outside. Or leave a note tucked in the screen door. Sound insane? To a Gen Zer, that was just Tuesday. Today, we're diving into something that'll blow your mind if you were born after 1995, how an entire generation grew up, fell in love, built careers, and lived full lives, without ever posting a single story. No Wi-Fi. No algorithms. No notifications. Just life, happening in real time. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see your phone. Let me tell you about Sarah. She's 48 now, lives in Portland, works in marketing. Totally normal. But in 1992, Sarah did something that would seem absolutely wild today. She planned an entire cross-country road trip with 3 friends using only a paper map, a AAA triptych, and a pocket full of quarters for payphones. No GPS. No group chat. No share my location. They decided on meeting points days in advance, and if someone didn't show up, you waited. Sometimes for hours. And you know what? They all made it. Every single stop. Because they had to trust each other. They had to communicate clearly the first time. There was no sorry, didn't see your text. This isn't ancient history, by the way. This was the early 90s. Nirvana was on the radio. The internet existed, but it was something only nerds with modems used to argue about Star Trek at 2 a.m. For everyone else, life happened offline. And somehow, they survived. Actually, more than survived. Ask most Gen Zers about their childhood, and you'll hear something surprising. They don't feel like they missed out. In fact, many of them feel kind of lucky. So how did they do it? How did a whole generation navigate friendships, relationships, boredom, information, emergencies, and growing up without the one thing we can't seem to live without today? Let's find out. 1. Making plans was an art form. Let's start with something simple, hanging out with friends. Today, it's effortless, right? Wanna grab coffee? Boom. Text sent. Response in seconds. Location shared. Done. But in the 80s and 90s, making plans required commitment. You'd call your friend's house, on a landline, the one their whole family shared, and you'd better hope they picked up and not their dad, who'd grill you like a detective. Who's calling? What's this about? She's eating dinner. And once you made the plan, that was it. It was locked in. No flaking. No sorry, something came up text 5 minutes before. If you said you'd meet at the mall at 3 p.m. by the fountain, you were there at 3 p.m. by the fountain. Because if you didn't show, your friend would just think you died. There was no way to let them know. This created something we've lost today, reliability. Your word actually meant something, because breaking it had real consequences. 2. Boredom was your best friend. Here's a question for you. When was the last time you were truly, deeply bored? Not scrolling TikTok because there's nothing better to do bored. I mean staring at the ceiling, brain melting, nothing to do bored. For Gen X? That was summer vacation. That was Saturday afternoon. That was every moment between getting home from school and dinner. And you know what happened in that boredom? Creativity exploded. Kids built forts in the woods. They invented games with sticks and rocks. They wrote stories, drew comics, taught themselves guitar by listening to the same Guns N' Roses tape 47 times in a row. They learned to entertain themselves, because no one was going to do it for them. There was no YouTube tutorial. No Instagram inspiration. Just a kid, alone with their thoughts, figuring out what to do with their hands. And yeah, sometimes they just sat there. Staring. Thinking. Daydreaming. letting their mind wander to places phones don't let us go anymore. 3. Finding information was a quest. Okay, imagine this scenario: you're watching Jeopardy! With your family. A question comes up: what year did the Titanic sink? Nobody knows. Today, you'd Google it in 4 seconds. Argument over. But in 1989? That question would haunt you. You'd lie awake thinking about it. You'd ask your teacher the next day. You'd go to the library after school, dig through the card catalog, find a book about shipwrecks, flip through the index, and finally, discover the answer: 1912. And you know what? You'd never forget it. Because you earned that knowledge. You hunted it down like treasure. Gen X grew up in a world where information was scarce and valuable. You couldn't just look it up. You had to know people. You had to read. You had to remember. And if you wanted to become an expert in something, photography, skateboarding, cooking, you found one book, one magazine, one person who knew, and you soaked up everything they had. There was no algorithm feeding you content. You had to seek it out. And that made learning feel like an adventure. 4. Friendships were face-to-face. Let's talk about friendship. Gen X didn't have 847 friends on social media. They had, 5 real friends. Maybe 10 if they were popular. But those friendships? They were deep. Because they were built on time spent together, actual, physical, in the same room time. You'd go to your friend's house after school and just hang out. Listen to CDs, flip through magazines. Talk about nothing for 3 hours. And yeah, sometimes it was boring. Sometimes you'd just sit there in comfortable silence, throwing a tennis ball at the wall. But that's how you knew someone. Not through their highlight reel. Not through their carefully curated posts. You knew what they looked like when they were upset. When they were goofy. When they had no makeup on in bed and were eating cereal in their pajamas at 2 p.m. Friendships weren't performative. They were private. Intimate. Real. And breakups? Oof. When a friendship ended, it ended. You didn't keep seeing their face pop up online. You didn't torture yourself watching them live their life without you. You just moved on. It hurt, but it was clean. 5. Dating without apps was terrifying and beautiful. And then there's dating. If you think swiping left is hard, try this: you like someone. You have to walk up to them, in person, look them in the eyes, and ask them out. Out loud. With your voice. No DMs. No haha reactions to test the waters. Just raw, terrifying vulnerability. And if they said no? You had to see them in class the next day. At lunch. In the hallway. There was no blocking, no one matching. Just awkwardness in the slow, painful process of moving on. But if they said yes? Magic. You'd pass notes in class. Talk on the phone for hours, whispering so your parents wouldn't hear. You'd make mixtapes, actual cassette tapes where you'd record songs off the radio, timing it perfectly so you didn't catch the DJ's voice. Every song meant something. Every note was reread 100 times. Because communication was limited, it became precious. And when you finally got to see them, that was the highlight of your whole week. Here's the thing that gets me. Gen X didn't just survive without social media. In a lot of ways, they thrived because of its absence. They learned patience. They learned how to be alone without being lonely. They built resilience, because failure wasn't broadcast to 500 people, it was just between you and the moment. They lived in a world where your worth wasn't measured in likes. Where your memories weren't performed for an audience. Where life happened first, and then you told people about it, maybe. If it came up. There's a Gen X phrase that captures this perfectly: you had to be there. Because some moments weren't photographed. Some nights weren't recorded. Some inside jokes only existed in the minds of the people who lived them. And that made them sacred. Now, I'm not saying social media is evil. It's given us incredible things: connection across distances, voices for the marginalized, communities that never could have existed before. But maybe, just maybe, Gen X has something to teach us. Maybe we don't need to document everything. Maybe we don't need to be reachable every second. Maybe boredom isn't the enemy. Maybe mystery is okay. Maybe we can put the phone down, look up, and just be here. In this moment. Right now. So the next time your Wi-Fi goes out and you feel that little spike of panic, remember, an entire generation grew up without it. And they turned out okay. More than okay. They learned to navigate by stars and street signs. They built friendships that lasted decades without a single text. They survived breakups without subtweeting. They fell in love with handwritten letters and scratchy phone calls and showing up, unannounced, just to see if you wanted to play. And maybe that's the real answer to how Gen X survived without social media. They didn't need to survive it. They were too busy living. If this video made you think, hit that like button. If you're Gen X and I got something wrong, or if you've got a story to share, drop it in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you're someone who can't imagine life without your phone, maybe try it. Just for an afternoon. Ride your bike somewhere. Knock on a friend's door. See what happens. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Until next time, put the phone down, look up, and live a little. See you in the next one.